Okay, hello and welcome back to part 2 of this series. In this part we're basically carrying on from where we left off. So what we're going to do first is define what's going to happen, or define the dimensions for the new image if the source is narrower than the the shape we want. So the first thing we're going to do is define a variable called scale, and this is going to be how much smaller the image is than, well, how much smaller the thumbnail is than the actual image that we're passing in. So this is going to be equal to the width that we want divided by the width of the image that we actually have. So that is size 1. No, it isn't. It's size 0. So if the image is narrower, we're going to be fitting the width of the image to the borders of our thumbnail. So if we just look at our two images here, you can see that for the case where it's taller, we've actually fixed the sides to the sides, if that makes sense. So we can get how much it needs to shrink by, the scale factor, by taking the width of the thumbnail divided by the width of the actual image. So I hope that makes sense. This sort of stuff can be quite hard to get your head around because it's kind of awkward maths-y. But if you don't really know what's going on, probably the best advice is just to, I don't know, work it out with a pen and paper. Or you could just copy it, it's entirely up to you. Anyway, now I've decided, well, we've got this scale factor, we're going to define the new size. And this is going to be the size of our image reduced by this amount. Effectively, it's going to be the size of the image, well, shrunk to our thumbnail. So we're going to be defining this in the same way as we did above, using the array format. So the first parameter is the width, and because we're fixing the width to our thumbnail, the width of our thumbnail to the width of our image, we're just going to set this to width. So we've set the new width of the image to the width of our desired thumbnail. So what we're doing at this point is actually resizing the image. We're not dealing with any cropping yet. And the height is going to be the width that we decided on divided by the aspect ratio, because that's what an aspect ratio is. So the width that we decided on is width, which I really can't type today, divided by, well, now we're dividing it by the source aspect. That's pretty simple. The next thing we're going to do is define the source position, source POS for short, also going to be equal to an array, and this is going to be the coordinate that we're going to start copying from on our image when we copy it. So again, going back to our blue squares, what we're trying to define is this point here, because images work from the top down. So we want x to be 0, the x coordinate obviously along the bottom x-axis, and the y coordinate to be this space here, which we'll have to calculate. So we'll do x first because it comes first, so x is that, and then the y coordinate has to be worked out with some sort of awkward maths. So let's just go back to here. So this space is going to be equal to the entire image height minus the height of our thumbnail, and then divide it by 2, because there are 2 of those spaces. However, you have to multiply the height by the scale factor, because we're dealing with sort of 2 coordinate systems here. One is the full size image coordinates, but we need to work in the small coordinates. So anyway, the code to do this is probably what you're interested in by now. It is the height, so size 1 with the e, multiplied by the scale factor, and then we take away the height of the thumbnail that we want, and then we divide this whole thing by the scale factor to get it back into image coordinates, and then divide it by 2 to get, we only want half of that, because without the divide by 2 it's equal to the entire space, top and bottom. Okay, so that's that done. And then we need to do a similar thing for the case where it's wider. So for this we're going to be using the height to define the scale parameter, because that's what's going to be fixed. If we just find one more time, we'll look back at this. You can see it for the case where it's wider, we fix the height to the height of our thumbnail. So here we do height over size 1, so that's height over image height. Then we're going to define our new size is equal to that same array, and this is going to be instead of fixing the width and calculating the new height, we're going to fix the height and calculate the new width. So the new width is going to be equal to the height, which we're going to fix to that in a moment, multiplied by the source aspect, because that's how aspect ratios work. And then the height is just going to be the height, except with an E. Okay? And then the source position is going to be basically the same thing, sort of. So instead of setting, well, you'll see. Is equal to array. So instead of setting the x coordinate to 0, we're going to set the y coordinate to 0 and calculate the x gap. So the x gap is using the exact same formula, except changing all the heights to widths. So we can basically just copy this down. So I'll just copy that, paste it there, change 1 to 0, and height to width, like so. And then for the second parameter, we'll just set 0. Okay, so that's all the complicated stuff done for this tutorial, so you'll be thankful of that, hopefully. And then obviously the final case is where it's the same shape, which is where the width and height is just the width and height, and the position is 0, 0. So let's just write that down. New size is equal to array width. Close enough. Wait, that was right, wasn't it? Better than I think. What's this? Source position is equal to array 0, 0. Okay, there we go. So now under here, once we've defined these awkward parameters, there's just one more check we want to make, well, have happen, and that is to make sure that both of them are greater than 0. Well, no, not necessarily. We want to make sure that the new size is greater than 0, because if it isn't, that causes a divide by 0 error somehow internally, and PHP throws a horrible looking error, and that's not something you want to show to your users. And they can actually create that if they uploaded, for example, an image that was 10,000 pixels wide and say 3 or 4 high. They can break the system, and we don't want that to happen. We just want to, have it work. So what we're going to do is make sure that, if they're below 0, we're going to set them to 1. And the way we can do that is using the max function. So we'll set new size 0 equal to max new size 0, and just 1 there. So what's happening here is the max function takes two parameters here, and it returns whichever one is bigger. So say if this is 0, it'll return 1 because 1 is bigger. If it's minus 10, it'll return 1 because 1 is bigger. If it's 10, it'll return 10 because 10 is bigger. So it's just quite a neat way to fix the value, or to do what we're doing. Obviously I'll do the same for 1. Okay, so that's that done. The next thing we need to do is actually copy the image onto the new thumbnail image. So now we've worked out our size information, we can just use this in the image copy resampled function. This function takes a whole heap of parameters, the first one being the image that you're trying to copy onto. So this is the one we created, which is thumb. The next one is the source image, the image you're copying from, which is just our source, which we created up here. The next one is the x and y coordinate that you're copying onto, so this is just 0, 0, because we want to fill up the whole image. The one after that is the location you want to copy from, so this is our source source position, so it's just the x and y is just source position 0 and source position 1. We just get rid of that m, don't know how that got there. Next two parameters are the new size of the image, so this is where it's actually rescaled. So it's just the new size variable 0 and new size 1. And finally, it's the size of the the original size of the image. So it's size 0 and size 1, which is defined in the first line of this function. Okay, so that should, in theory, copy the image. And the next thing we need to do is have it saved out to the file. So the way we do that is using the image PNG function. Obviously, I'm meant to remember at this point to point out that this will save a PNG image. You can obviously save the other formats using image JPEG and image GIF, but for the sake of simplicity, we're doing PNG. What you'd need to do is essentially duplicate this check up here and just use the appropriate image function inside of each one. Obviously you wouldn't need the else case because we've already got that up here and returned false. So we're just going to use image PNG here, thumb, and the second parameter is save. That's what it was called, wasn't it? I think. Yeah, save. That's the location we're saving to. And we're going to, and we are going to just return this because it returns true on success or false on failure, and that's what we want our function to do as well. And then just to add a final bit of extra functionality, just because it's easy to do so, what we're going to do is add a check to see if save is false, and if it is, we'll just output the image directly to the browser. So this is quite a useful thing to do, because that's something you might want to do with this function. So you might want to have it dynamically create a thumbnail from another image and just have it output straight away, instead of saving it and then redirecting to that image. So what we can do is very simply just check if save is equal to false, or is identical to false, I should say. We'll do something else, otherwise we'll save the image to the path. So what we're going to do instead is the exact same thing, so I can just copy this actually, like so, and just remove this parameter, and that will just have it output directly. So what we'll just do very quickly before moving on to the next part is check this for syntax errors. So we'll just make sure it's defined and not being called, so we'll remove that line, and we'll just have it, well, we'll hit F5 and we get a blank page, which is good, that means no syntax errors. Okay, so if you come back for the next part, what we'll do is test this out and correct all the errors that are probably in there somewhere. But no, I'll show you how to use it, and basically, well, yeah, I'll just show you it. Okay, so thank you for watching, and come back for part 3, which will hopefully be a bit shorter than these two.